In the early 20th century, the dreams of the alchemists were finally realized. In fact, you'll even see our modern chemical table is aligned specifically with the old alchemical table that sorted the elements based on astronomical symbols. And you will still, in some cases today, see the chemical table lined up with planets, star signs, aligned constellations, etc., aligned with the particular elements that have already been aligned by them. But naturally, there are elements that ancient people did not know about that have no astronomical alignment. No, that's just because we've continued to move forward since the dreams of the alchemists were nascent. Men like Carl Jung were essentially like, we must take this dream to a higher realization. And men like Albert Einstein were like, Bobbum. That's essentially how that went down. Guess who won the culture war? You know, my dad always raised me on dream interpretation as an interesting and valuable tool. But most of society that I've seen views Albert Einstein as a genius and observes modernity and progressiveness and science as it is today, not the scientific method, but science as it is today, at least before 2020, as a venerable pursuit. But in reality, what's up here? More of a venerable pursuit than cataloging chemicals, specifically because we wouldn't be able to catalog chemicals if it wasn't for proper alignment, you know, higher alignment. That's exactly why we align elements with planets and stuff like that, because there's something there. And, you know, I think sometimes, where is the validity in the zodiac? Well, all the planets have geomagnetic elements to them. They have geomagnetic factors to them. And as they align, rotate around, and shuffle various potentials, there is a differentiated geomagnetic field in our solar system that is, you know, we can't see it with our naked eyes. We'll be able to see it like 100 years in the future. We'll be able to catalog it very easily and put numbers and dates to it. But right now, at the moment, we're only starting to kind of guess the fact that, yes, indeed, actually, it does matter if Aquinas is in microwave, you know, stuff like that. It actually does matter if planet is here or there or there or there. And that's why there's always been sort of a subtle recognition that your birth month has some form of patterning, an imprint into you. It's very specifically because of the way that God has crafted the planets in our solar system. And we align the way that the elements interact with us with the way that we have interpreted very inaccurately, very shoddily, very sloppily, the way this is that we have interpreted these planets to be interacting with us. You see. And ultimately, the more you study Carl Gustav Jung, the more it makes sense. The more you study Albert Einstein, the more questions you're left with. And sometimes that's a good thing, but sometimes that's a bad thing. I'd say it's better to learn about the archetypes and then go, oh, I understand everything about the pantheon now. That all makes perfect sense, how that arose in a historical moment from the zodiac into archetypes, shot through with anthropomorphization. That makes perfect sense. Whereas the more you study Einstein, the more you're just like, well, you know, there's probably a gajillion mathematical equations that I don't understand, so I don't know anything, and therefore, like, it's just a big open question, and I don't know, maybe morality is good, maybe morality is bad, I don't know. You know, that is ultimately, I think, the key to that discussion and why it is actually fundamental, and why Sigmund Freud was actually put into the dialogue, into the culture, specifically to overshadow Carl Gustav Jung and all of his brilliant works. What a sick man. God. At least he's dead. God has wrath. And I know for a fact that when he died, he saw horrendously terrifying things, and there was no way his ego could cope with it. Ergo, he's stuck in hell. Bye-bye, Sigmund. I hope you had a good time being Freud. In my gut, I prefer to go with the Occam's razor of loving any and all potential good and godly ways life could have come about. Who am I to deny God's works just because I cannot see them with my own two eyes? Now, Jimmy Dore, a.k.a. Megaphone Mike, ain't a bad guy by any means. I think a lot of media outlets would have you focus more on Jimmy doubting Trump than him tendering valuable advice to him. Get away from this evil creep, man. You know, you are the sovereign of the United States. You do not have to worry yourself with the sort of stuff going on in the Middle East outside of making the American people, their lives, more productive, more fulfilling. And one of the ways you can do this is legitimately by distancing yourself from the Israeli government, by not donating so much money, because it's a donation at the end of the day. They're not doing anything for us. They're not exchanging our money for anything valuable. We're donating it to them. It's a gib. Okay? So get away from that. No more gibs for Israel. No more welfare for Israel. Get to solving these problems at home, because we got a ton of them, and I know for a fact that you want to solve them. You have the heart to solve them. You have the dedication, you have the passion, and you have the courage to solve our American problems. Get back over here, man. Stop that. That's what Jimmy Dore is saying. And a lot of mainstream media, they want to say, oh, Jimmy Dore is our hero. He's going to attack and destroy the evil dragon Trump. But in reality, you know, if Trump would listen to Jimmy, Jimmy would be a good advisor to a good king. As simple as that. I've said this a lot over the years. It's a personal favorite thought, and I'm surprised I haven't shared it with you all yet. So, here goes. William Barr was a guy personally... William Barr, think about that. William Barr. You remember him, right? He was a kind of square, larger guy. William Barr was the guy personally responsible for Jeffrey Epstein while he was in prison, about 5 years ago or so. William Barr's father invited Jeffrey Epstein into their home when William Barr was a little kid. Did you know that? Now you do. He invited him to be his math tutor, despite the fact that we know now that Jeffrey Epstein knows nothing about math. All right, so this is very interesting. I'm not joking, you know, this is some real facts of life. God only knows what happened. But we do know William Barr would write stories about being abducted by aliens while he was young. What do we know about modern Israelis? Well, they're Israelis. They're not vegetarian. They're Israelis. They're abducted by aliens. You know, and if you look at the modern UFO cult, it has the Star of David with the swirls and stuff like that in it. It's interesting that it might just be theosophy and maybe a strange form of anthroposophy where they're trying to create a new anthro, as in alien. But like legitimately, like 70% of the alien stuff comes from Israel, and then it bounces around in the peripheries of America, you know, confused telephone game translations over in Montana and Washington and stuff like that. Although Washington is severely influenced by Israeli politics. In fact, that's where pickleball was born, and pickleball is now the #1 sport of Israeli expats. It's an extremely lame sport, by the way. But yeah, after writing, like literally writing, you can find this writing if you really look for it. After writing when he was a child about being abducted by aliens and going on wild journeys with them, William Barr, he would kill Epstein, his math tutor. Math tutor. Food for thought. Food for thought, guys. Food for thought. Biden thought he'd be a bigger, better, badder Bill Clinton, but just ended up being another Mahmoud Abbas. The 89-year-old who's responsible for the PLO. Mind you, PLO also somewhat tangentially related to Operation Gladio and severely infiltrated by the CIA. Just like the Black Panthers. Yes, some militant organization. You got that, boy. Boy! Anyways, let's move on from that. The Israelis genuinely think it's worth more to see their enemies and their families, children who are too young to consent to things like Islam, to anything such as religions, tortured and slowly starved to death, than be respected on the world stage. Their choice. Something I've noticed Zionists do is if they can tear down at least one person, sometimes multiple, sometimes entire villages worth, but at least one person is enough to keep their own inadequacies from taking center stage. At least in their own minds, because that's mostly where that happens. It comes off as lack of maturity to most people. We all see what's going on. We've all seen this growing up. It is severely immature behavior that apparently the Israelis have never grown out of. And like, I will watch people. It is astounding. I will watch people from Israel, whether it's on Facebook, whether it's on Kiwi Farms. I will watch them behave in a way that is 10 years below the global parity. They're way behind par. And they legitimately think this is going to work out good for them. Good luck. Because you're gonna need it, okay? The Palestinians don't need luck. They're already in the arms of God. You're gonna need a lot of luck. Qatar has the same flag as Hassa, Haasa, if you want to look that up, and occupy the same area. Unlike Kuwait and Kosovo, Qatar is a real country. And they have a lot to leverage in that position. Kind of wild that Javier Milei looks like he could have been a Seamus. But, come to find out, he's actually Netanyahu's distant cousin. Wowzer. Wowzer. So they're making real steps on the global, real steps right there. You got a whole country. Argentina. Oh! Like, legitimately, like, a century of Nazis. The Nazi party, I suspect highly, was legitimately operated by Zionists behind the scenes while Hitler was on mind-scrabbling amounts of drugs. And then they all went to Argentina while Hitler died with Eva Braun in the bunker and ruined Argentina. And now that Argentina is completely ruined, Israel owns them. Fascinating stuff. We're dealing with some fascinating stuff. I see the webs connecting things sometimes. Occasionally, the light of my clear observations shines through individual issues, and the strings shimmer, but for a moment, to disappear into complexity thereafter. It's still a valuable insight, I would say. I don't know who needs to hear this, but getting upset at black people in video games will not save the West. Just saying. Just saying. People say the internet is the greatest tool humanity has ever invented. That may be true. I won't rule it out, but that statement does hit my ear wrong. It's too progressive for my tastes. New and novel does not mean better than the classics. Neo-vaginas are an example of this. So you say the internet is the greatest tool humanity has. Really? Greater than music theory? What do you think most people use the internet for, It is one of many tools in a countryman's toolbox. Like well-polished spokes on a finely crafted wheel. When you're depressed and think you're worthless, that's not your lowest state. In fact, it's a very valuable state for introspection and divination. You're at your lowest when you're cruel. And that's a fact. And you could probably feel that in your heart. As somebody who was a Protestant who took genuine steps to pray constantly and give thanks for everything I enjoyed, keynote, dropping to your knees and thinking of the Mother of Christ and thanking God for your struggles is a way of really leveling up your prayer life. I'm serious about that. I'm really serious about that. Never give up on making your own prayers. Never give up on saying things to people that are on point in the moment, that are grounded, that are contained in thusness and suchness. But don't forget the classics. Don't forget what your ancestors have said tens of thousands of times. In earnest. Don't forget that. You will be found lacking if you do. I have a weird gut feeling that Masonry, Freemasonry, is in its death throes as the ape of Christendom realizes its self-imposed tragedy. That we are not moving to some illumination, but sliding back to the Iron Age. Also, I think a lot of what really drives nostalgia is lamentation of good things plug pulled before their time, as it wasn't making enough money for the powers that be. So support for a particular culture or a cultural point withered, was pulled back from the power structures. So people pine for it, but they see it again, don't enjoy it as much. Fascinating thing. There's a lot to say about nostalgia. Nostalgia is definitely a deep well of conversation and introspection and reflection. Something to think about. Grafting trees is some high-quality fidelity stuff. Really, you can run native software on invasive hardware. The invasive hardware can uptake nutrients and water quicker. Yet all the seeds that propagate outside of that particular area, coming off of the plant, are native. Brilliant. Truly, truly brilliant. You know, I'd say about 98% of women want a baby. Some days badly. But modern accoutrements have aligned us against strife more than our natural state. So the instinct is overwhelmed with both low pain tolerance and omnipresent fear. I don't know what it is like to be a woman, so I do not know their pain and their struggle. But as a man, In postmodernity, I do feel as if I am inadequate. And I do not feel as if I've been any more adequate the more material acquisition that I come about, because easy come, easy go. And our hard fought culture, my hard fought Celtic culture, is mostly gone. You know, the French have some glimmers of it that pop up from time to time. The Irish keep their ancient ways. But for the most part, that connective tissue binding all of humanity has withered like strands of silk that had all of their moisture sucked out. And thus we suffer. But we should suffer nobly. And that is my task to you. Suffer nobly. Alright, y'all. Cheers.